takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back
Well, good morning,
down?
Lori and Luna. Welcome to the Magnolia Moonshot 2030. We are so excited about having you here today. Lori van Onsem is here with us from Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and Luna is here with us today from Portland, Oregon, just down the road from me. And Lori and Luna were both part of a teen girl cohort called Our Future that was in part inspired by the Magnolias. And it really is amazing what you two have been doing in your short number of years. So I would love for you to just say a little bit about what you are doing. I will add, Lori just wrote a book called If Nature Had a Voice. And this coming March, Lori and I will be going on a climate expedition to the Antarctic together with Robert Swan and the company 2041. And Luna is also a climate ambassador with Climate Interactive, and she has won some pretty amazing awards recently. So Luna, why don't we start with you? And I'll just also pose a question that you can speak into. As the Magnolias were talking last week, I think almost all of us said, when we were in our teens, we were doing very different things. I think our main focus may have been boys, yes, maybe school, but we're also curious about what sparked you into action, what inspired you, who inspired you to really start to follow your passion, your heart. So Luna, let's start with you.
Of course, thank you all so much. It's an honor to be here. And of course, as youth, it means so much to feel heard by other adults and such accomplished women as you all are. So my name is Luna Abadia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a 17-year-old climate activist living in Portland, Oregon, in the United States. So I'm currently studying environmental science in my international baccalaureate program at school. But most of my work happens outside of school. So I am the founder and executive director of a climate organization called the Effective Climate Action Project. We're youth run, and we focus on bringing focus to systems thinking and systemic and effective solutions to climate change. We do that by running these workshops called climate simulations. They come from, as Darcy mentioned, En-ROADS and Climate Interactive, and we've been able to utilize those kind of computer simulation tools along with our youth voices to be able to run these workshops with a variety of audiences and teach people about what we think is really critical to tackle this issue. So I'm also the climate point person for Plan International USA's Youth Advisory Board. And so I help assist them with different climate policy. And I think currently I've been focusing more on connecting with many of the youth that I was able to meet at COP26 and COI16. This October, I was in Glasgow, Scotland, and was able to meet many people there. But to answer your other question, which was my inspiration to start climate activism, for me, I began, I think, with a very visceral and simple feeling of fear. So probably around 7th grade, I began learning more about the climate crisis, and this feeling of urgency and necessity was kind of building inside me. That along with my personal connection to nature. So I grew up with, I was lucky to have a forest behind my house that I spent many hours in, and having that connection to nature and then growing up and realizing that not everyone has access to that made me realize that I wanted to protect it even more. So that's a bit of my climate story, but yeah, thank you.
Lori, Luna, can you say a little bit about some of the awards you've just recently been given?
Yeah, so I've been honored to receive the President's Environmental Youth Award through the EPA. I've also won the T-Mobile Changemaker Challenge Award and the Ashoka Changemakers Award. I also won the United Nations Gender Award through COP26 and International Eco Hero Award. I think that's about it. Yeah, thank you.
That's fabulous. Congratulations. Lori, tell us a little bit about your inspiration, your story, what you're up to.
A bit less awards for me, but yeah, so my name is Laura. I'm 16 years old. I'm located in, well, near Amsterdam. And yeah, I'm still completing my high school, so I'm in the 5th year now, one more and then I'm off to university hopefully. And yeah, I've as Darcy mentioned, I wrote a book called If Nature Had a Voice for my IB personal project, and it was meant to be more like a school project, but I think I spent a lot more time than I was meant to spend on it because I just loved it so much. And yeah, the money I got from selling it, or at least the donations I got from it, I first used the first part of it to plant sequoia trees in in Wales, and then the rest of it is now going to the trip that me and Darcy are going to in Antarctica. And yeah, so then me and my dad, we started the Our Future project, also that, like Darcy mentioned, we kind of tried to get together girls from all over the world who were kind of like me, struggling with dealing with eco anxiety and dealing with all these problems and feeling hopeless. And we tried to together work on a project, which eventually we presented to business leaders, our findings from like interviews we did and different research we conducted. And we also then went on a personal mastery journey together and got mentorship from all these incredible women. Yeah, so I'm also the leader of the sustainability council at my school. So I'm kind of leading like every other week in front of these students from our school, where I'm kind of leading them, helping them to understand what eco anxiety is, kind of helping them make changes in the school. And that's kind of what I love doing, is inspiring others to not feel eco anxiety and to kind of feel the power within themselves to make a bigger change. So I think that's about it. And then the reason why I kind of got into this field, I think it was different kind of triggers, but mostly it was learning about climate change in school, and getting this people telling you, oh, this is everything that's happening, the world is really messed up, and then class is over and then you kind of talk about boys and high school drama and all of that. And for me, that didn't really feel right. So I think any chance I got with school projects, I'm lucky to be in an international school. So that means I have a lot of freedom in choosing particular subjects. So that's why I always try to choose climate over everything. And then there's this one video that I watched, which is, I don't know if you've watched it, Prince Aya, Dear Future Generation, Sorry. But it's a really emotional and inspiring video where he kind of says sorry to future generations, ending on a very like hopeful note. And I was really like, I loved the video so much, and I think that's what set me into this mindset of, okay, I want to change something. So I think yeah that's my story, I guess.
I love it. And if you have the chance to read Lori's book, If Nature Had a Voice, you can find it through the Beyonders Foundation. It really is fabulous. And it's Lori, it's a young girl in conversation with the tree over time. It's just magical and powerful. Thank you for that. I'd like you to just say a little bit more about the project the teen girls in Our Future came up with around climate justice, eco anxiety, and ecofeminism. And in that work, how do you ensure that you're very inclusive of, people that normally would not be in that conversation? So Luna, Lori, whoever'd like to start.
I'd love to maybe start. I think so. Just to give some more background on the project itself, I was watching Greta Thunberg's movie with my family, and when I came home, I was so, actually learned afterwards that it was eco anxiety, and I was crying. And my dad was telling me, what can we do to make that feeling of hopelessness and powerlessness go away? And for me, that was having a community of people my age who were also feeling like this. And like, for example, now knowing Luna, it's already helped me so much, just first of all, to have someone to look up to, but also to be able to talk to someone who can feel the same as me, and to see, that I'm not the only one, because at school sometimes it feels like that. And then secondly, actually feel like I can have a big impact, which obviously then we were able to do with talking to business leaders who, in my view at least, can do more than maybe I can at this moment. And then also, I guess, through that personal mastery and through the mentorship, learn more how to deal with emotions like eco-anxiety and stress, and also just work on my self-confidence, work on all these things that, who am I as a person? So that's kind of the idea we had in the start, because I was really, through the eco-anxiety, I don't think I was able to really let the climate activist of myself out. So I was more, stressed with school and all of that. But so that's why it started. And about the inclusiveness that you're talking about, I think we obviously we posted the opportunity as much as possible on social media, and we got a lot of girls. But there's also some, like one of my friends, Tiara, who she's very insecure about herself, and she, wants to join the conversation but usually doesn't because of various reasons. So I think through, like encouraging her, and obviously with different connections, we tried to get as many people who we knew had it in them but maybe didn't dare to come in. And I think, Luna, you can speak to this maybe more. We had a really nice group of girls who, all had different backgrounds, different places in the world, but still cared about the same issue. Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And coming from the United States, it was probably the first time I had been in a group of youth and female leaders from all over the world. And so that was very inspiring for me to step into. Also, so I guess speaking to diversity, that's a question I'm constantly asking myself, especially in my organization, because we started in Portland, Oregon, but wanting to expand and include it as many voices as possible. I think what I've learned on the conceptual level is that leadership is not only about being in charge. It's about giving others a sense of ownership and agency so that they can feel like a leader in their own role. And when we have a community like that, like in the board of director meetings that we run, things like that, I feel that I've been able to create this atmosphere where more people can connect deeply with our team's vision and want to act proactively, because when you feel in charge of your personal role and what you can do, you're more excited to help the group vision. So I think that's something that I've pursued, but also, I focus on a very specific intersection of climate. But even with that, I feel that there are so many ways in which I can bring climate justice viewpoints into my work. And I encourage anyone doing the same to always consider what other viewpoints can I bring in, even if it's a very specific area of work.
Wonderful. Part of this work, it is so complex. It's tough. It's daunting some days. It's, it can cause fear. And how do you, each of you, how do you recenter yourself or find your balance again when you get thrown off or something doesn't go as planned? Because it is something that, we all constantly have to do. How do you refine that balance?
Yes, that's the big question. For me, I spend so much time both working on projects, but also excited about projects. I like to stay busy. And so I have to balance that with also understanding that rest is important, connecting with friends and family is important, sleep and joy and connection with nature is just as valuable to our activism work. So for me, I would say when things get tough, I often check in with myself and try to pursue things like running, hiking, connecting, with the nature around me. I also, have learned to make tough decisions in that there's so many things I want to do. I have to say no to some of them. So I often consider like how, if a new opportunity arises, how will this kind of fit in and flow with my current work? What is the impact that, could be found out of me joining? And also, am I personally excited about this? Because, it's important to have that drive and that focus when you're doing this work. So I never want to spread myself too thin.
Great. Lori?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to what Luna's saying. I think for me, I'm very busy with school, and the times when I, get out of balance is usually thinking I'm not like doing enough, because and I really want I have all these ideas of I should do this, I should do that, or I want to do this, but in the end I'm already completely busy with school, so it's really hard to fit in then the climate activists in me. But I think, yeah, like Luna said, just I just try to stay involved, and yeah, when I'm really passionate about something, just try and find the time to work on it, and try to, yeah, now I'm really trying to like have less stress for school and prioritize climate action. But it's obviously hard when you have everyone around you who's not doing it, and then yeah, I think it's just a really hard question. And I struggle with that every day, and sometimes it's going really well, and sometimes everything just happens all at once, and then I just try to talk to people and see what they think. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
a hard
Yeah, I
question.
think it's something we all, still we have to pay attention to, taking care of ourselves first. And you've got a question that in some ways relates to what Lori just shared with us.
Yes. So it's so inspiring to hear the two of you talk, and I just appreciate the energy and commitment. I'm curious, do you see, others your age is this a growing thing? Are more and more of your peers also leaning in and finding a way to engage? Or, what would your comment be on that?
I'd personally be interested to hear what Laura has to say from across the world, but in my, bubble I call home, I would say that there's kind of both ends of the spectrum, and that I see a lot of people gaining interest and wanting to get involved. And at the same time, I do see climate apathy, and people who are just so overwhelmed, understandably, with everything else that's going on, and feel like they don't have the time to dedicate to this issue. So that's why I've been, starting this Instagram live series called Let's Talk Climate, really trying to encourage other people who are not yet climate activists, but have that potential to get involved. Because I think there's this quote, it says something like, if you're not already, or they're only climate activists or future climate activists. And I think that has kind of guided my personal mindset to be able to encourage other people to join the movement.
Yeah, I guess for me, even if it's the other side of the world, it's kind of the same. I know from being the leader of the sustainability council at our school, in the first year there were maybe 20 members, and this, like the third year on now, there's 50. And our school isn't that big, so it's still a really high percentage. And but then on the other hand, like if there's a lesson or something, or a video, and something mentions climate change, I see all these heads turning at me, as if I'm the one, I'm labeled climate change, and all the rest are free of that, or that those jokes that I'm not really keen about, that like oh, it's so cold, why isn't there global warming? There's still those people who are definitely, I think, like the older they get, the more they at least think it's cooler not to care. But so that's something that I struggle with as well, seeing that every day. But I think I'm trying to like hold on to the hope of that increase of people, definitely the younger grades, who are really trying to get involved. And yeah, just it has to happen, so just trust that it will.
Laura, I really resonate with what you're speaking to. Something I really see on social media quite a bit is this kind of hierarchy of people who are more involved and less involved, and distancing people who we call climate activists from the general public. I think that's really problematic, because we need everyone to see themselves in the solution, and as part of that work to get there. And when we uplift people, I think that's wonderful. Like, it's great to say like, you're so inspiring and congratulations, you've achieved so much. And also, I wish that more people could see themselves in the work that I do. And part of being inclusive in my messaging is also always considering, like, will this encourage or discourage people from acting? Because I want to share about my accomplishments, but also not putting that as something that will block others from getting involved.
Wonderful. So Laura has a question, and just so you both know, Laura is a contributing researcher to the IPCC report. So Laura, over to you.
Thanks, Darcy. So I'm curious if you all have noticed something among your kind of generation. So I've been off social media mostly this year for my mental health, but when I have gone on and posted about climate, I noticed something curious that kind of shifted this year, which is that the pushback I get is no longer from climate denialists, accusing me of being paid to, promote climate conspiracy, but now it's from climate nihilists, right? People saying, what's the point? We're screwed. We can't do anything about it. So, you're wrong in saying that we have to take action. And I'm curious if this is something you're seeing in your generation, and if so, how you argue against that, or how you think about that.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear from your point of view. And, I so admire the IPCC. I've used it in many of the reports that I write. I started this kind of research project analyzing the impacts of climate change using a case study that I created from orange farmers in Japan. So thank you, just a side bit. But yes, that's something I'm absolutely seeing. I've tried many different tactics, and I'm still trying to find the right way to approach that when people feel that they just don't want to get involved. There's no point. I think for me, one of the things that helps is to break it down and to say, like, we can leave this to later, but we're all going to face the impacts one way or another, and also making it really approachable. So I think an activity I encourage many people who are not sure about engaging in climate activism to do is to create a list, one list, or I guess create a joint list. One of that aspect, one of the lists is to write down all of the issues that you are angered by or that you care about underneath the giant umbrella of climate change. So that could be deforestation, plastic waste, things like that. The second list is to consider what your personal skills are. What can you influence? Like, what do you have to offer? So it could be, I'm artistic, or I enjoy speaking, or I, speak multiple languages, or, personal experience. I have experienced impacts of climate change that is just as valuable as academic kind of knowledge, for example. And then the third list is kind of putting that all together and understanding, like, given the problems, given what I have to offer, what actually excites me. And so figuring out, like, what makes me excited. Are there projects around me? Are there groups that I can join? And I think that's a great activity to be able to kind of see yourself amongst the larger sphere, the larger chaos of climate action, and also understand that, we can each hold our own point of intersection and our own point of entry, and that is valuable to come at it from where we are, because the more people that are involved, the more impactful our collective action will be.
That's a very profound way of saying, just meet people where they are and engage them from there. Thank you. Lori.
Yeah, I like love how you put that, Luna. I think also when we had the privilege of getting Clover Hogan from Force of Nature to, in our future team, then to kind of talk to us. And one of the things she said that I still remember is, while there's so much that's lost, there's still so much we can fight for. And I think that's kind of something, we can tell those people that, while there's one way to look at it, there's so much that's already lost, and that, so much is going to go wrong. There's still a small thing we can fight for, and the only thing we can do is fight for that. So, it's, for me, it might be, I can agree with the idea that, it's really hard now to do something, and it's really late, and there's not a lot of chance that we can really, like, turn it back. But the only thing that we can really do is try the best we can, because otherwise it's definitely going to happen. So that's kind of the mindset I try to put myself in, which doesn't always work, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that a lot of the personal kind of disinterest and guilt can arise from being told for so many years, often by fossil fuel companies, that we need to focus on individual action. I think, when you're only considering the plastic utensils and the straws and taking shorter showers and turning off the lights, of course you're going to feel overwhelmed, because all you're thinking about is, I am the problem, like I'm, failing this world, and can I do anything? No. And then of course, I think it's easy to kind of give up and disconnect yourself, because being in that space of activism is overwhelming. And what I think I try to do with my organization is help people see the larger picture and see the systems that are at play, and say that yes, individual action is important, but how can we use that as a stepping stone to more effective action? And that can be by seeing, the paths between consumerism and kind of company action, and trying to tackle, or policy, technology, but making that something that is approachable, and encouraging people to look for root causes of the issue instead of only focusing on the aftermath and the effects. So.
All right. Well, I know who I'm voting for president in a few years. You both kind of spoke to this, but I'm channeling Roberta Baskin, one of our other Magnolias, who was unable to join us today. She loves to say, hope is a verb. And she's quoting someone else, hope is a verb. And it's, rolling up our sleeves and really, taking action. What gives each of you hope today?
I think for me, it's, well, it's maybe not, for the leaders of today are obviously not doing that much, but I think it's already a good sign that they're at least becoming more aware of it. And for me, it's more about, I think while they might not have the right reasons, every business and every politician is trying to at least reduce the carbon footprint and is looking for like new solutions. So that's giving the voice to more youth than was before. I'm still not near to enough, but at least more than it was. And I think Luna, you can speak to this very much, but the youth that's starting to mobilize. And you were at COP20 at the COI, and just already hearing about all the youth that was gathered there, and all these people who are working together and finding climate activism together, was already inspiring to hear from Luna. But
Yeah, it's definitely sometimes hard to find that hope, but for me, it was, being in Scotland at the Conference of Youth and meeting all of these other youth leaders that are involved in this, collective fight for justice. And I think seeing their bravery, hearing their stories, and also just all of the individual kind of projects that they're working on, was very inspiring for me, and made me feel less alone. I think, something that made me feel so much of that eco-anxiety when I was in 7th grade and early high school was believing that I was the only one that cared. And of course, it's easy to believe that when no one else, in your friend group or in your high school seems to care. But the more I do this work, the more I realize that people around me do care. And I start to be able to connect with people and bring that out of them, because I do think everyone has that potential to care. So for me, I use hope as a way to keep myself moving, because otherwise fear can be paralyzing. And there are moments where it creeps in, but I always try to recenter myself with why I'm doing this, and how many other people around the world are focusing on climate change and climate action in this very moment.
Wonderful. Jackie, you have a question for Lori and Luna?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'm just pretty blown away by the two of you, both in terms of your brilliance, but also in terms of your authenticity. It's really quite inspiring. And my question for you is one of, and you spoke to it a little bit, Luna, when you talked about meeting other youth activists. And I guess what I'd like to know is, what is the collaboration like, both with other youth activists and also with other organizations, other adults, in order to create impact? I know that both of you are creating a lot of impact independently. You're both, each of you are a force of nature. But the question becomes, what does the collaboration look like?
Yeah, I can start, and maybe Laura can kind of add a bit, but let's see. I think a lot of it is grounded in social media, in that we may have our own personal projects, but those both involve many people and also are often seeking out partnerships with other groups. As the more kind of intertwined our network is, the more kind of reach that often comes from that work. I do feel like there is an issue, or kind of a problem that could be focused on a bit more in the climate movement, in that there's this expectation to start something or found something or be the leader of your own idea, and therefore we have many independent projects working alongside each other but not together. And so that's something that I've been trying to encourage people to focus more on: partnerships and collaboration amongst people. I think, for example, I recently led a workshop with Plan International for youth change makers that are just starting to create their own projects about SDGs they care about. And the whole kind of point of the webinar was to talk about how do we create partnerships, why are they important, and how can we kind of do that within our own area of focus. So I do think that's something that, many more of us can work to improve. But I also think that especially, I think, outside of the US and in more collective societies, it's something that is happening much more, and hopefully in the future, but especially with, social media, allows us to stay much more interconnected.
Yeah, I think exactly like you said, I think for me, it's like a community of climate activists who are all in it for the good reasons. And that's why it creates such a, for me, it was so nice to be more and more part of the social media community, where everyone's really encouraging each other. And you probably all know that if you're in a room full of people who are all all want you to do well, it's always so inspiring and powerful. So I think that's the community of climate activists. I think just the problem with that is that it's, like Luna spoke to, really hard to pull people in. And from the outside, I think it looks a bit exclusive, because it seems like it's, there's certain things you should do to become a climate activist. Like for me, I didn't call myself a climate activist until my dad said it, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not out on the street. I'm not, trying to become a politician. But then he was like, no, you're a climate activist, and just already that word already makes me feel more part of that community. So yeah, I think while the community is really nice and it's so wonderful to be more and more part of it, I think we should focus more on, like Luna said, connecting the people within the community, but also pulling people back in to it.
Wonderful. Just amazing. One of the mandates of the Magnolias is to really help create a tailwind for leaders like yourself, and just know that if there's any way we can support you, we will be there. So we are now connected. And Luna, I'm glad you mentioned the SDGs, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It is one of our areas of focus. And Laura will be leading a project to help us understand the interconnectedness of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and where we can really intervene to have the greatest impact. But given that, we ask all of our guests to offer up a couple of calls to action that anybody, anywhere on the planet can do. It is an individual action, but collectively it adds up. So what might your calls to action be?
I can start maybe. So my first one is thinking more about eco-anxiety. And I would really recommend Force of Nature, and especially Clover Hogan's TED Talk. It's called What to Do When Climate Change Feels Unstoppable. So definitely look that up. And in that, she explains how there's kind of two ways to, well, everyone has their own stories. So for example, I'm too small to act, or the problem's too big, or, all these different stories that we tell ourselves to stop us from taking more ambitious climate action. And in the video, she explains really well how to challenge that through focus, which is what Luna's talking about. What am I good at? What makes me happy? What needs to be done? And secondly, it would be through what's the second way? I've just forgotten, but watch the video then to find out, some suspense. And then my second call to action is on the social media platform, follow climate activists, follow Indigenous people, follow people, all types of people, to make sure that it's inclusive. And also then kind of linked to that is surrounding yourself also in person with people that also care about the issue. So I've also lost some friends who didn't share the same values as me, but making new friends and having like stronger connections with people who do really helped me to feel more comfortable with myself and also help me to become better climate activists. So yeah, that's my 2 calls to action.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my first call to action is to seek out direct impact, and that can start with your home. Within my organization, I advocate for systems thinking, but that also doesn't mean that individual action doesn't count. We just have to go about it effectively. And so with the time that I've spent working with the En-ROADS model by Climate Interactive, I've seen that several solutions can be really impactful. I think one of those would be electrification. And you can do this by making your next car electric or buying a used car. I do really think we need to break that stigma because there are less expensive kind of options that are out there. And the more that we as consumers show that there's this demand, the more that those companies will respond. So electrification, and that can also be with appliances in your home. That doesn't mean to buy new things right away, but just when they need replacing to make that switch, because switching from carbon intensive objects to non-carbon intensive objects is a really important switch that we can make. And the second thing would be to switch your home to renewable resources. So I know at least in the United States, you can check with your local provider, and they often have a green plan that will allow you to move off of fossil fuels to renewable energy. And those are both things that we've done within my family and make our home a better place. The second call to action I would give you all is to work to generate conversations with others around the climate crisis. And as we spoke to throughout this podcast, we're all connected in one way or the other. And yet I feel that we hardly ever acknowledge the fact that we're all going through this collective struggle together in everyday spaces. And so I think the more that we can work to break those barriers and speak about our feelings of fear, anxiety, about our hopes and curiosities, and unpack these difficult topics together, the more everyone will begin to focus more on this issue, and we can all feel hopeful about tackling it. So I'm not saying this to encourage you all to go convince your local climate denier, but at least find someone who you can reach out to and initiate conversation. And also, I think it makes us feel less lonely within the large scheme of things. So, today you can find at least one person to try this with. And we did actually create an Instagram post on my organization. It's at effective.climate.action. You scroll down, it's like one of the first posts. It's how to talk to people about climate change so that they care. And there are a few tips for initiating that conversation in a way that is open-minded and not imposing yourself on the listener, but meeting them halfway, as we spoke to before. So yeah.
Wonderful. I have learned so much from the women here today, the Magnolias, and Anne, I'm channeling you. Just a really quick story. In my early days of starting sustainability work at Nike, the word was foreign, the concept was foreign, and I wish I had had Anne in my ear at that point. But years later, she would always pose the question, if they really don't engage with climate or sustainability, just simply ask them, what do you love? What do you want to conserve? And to start there. And that's always been so helpful to engage many of those who don't want to engage, because everybody loves something. So Anne, I thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. And if I could just comment too on what I'm hearing from Luna and Laura. In some ways, I'm hearing that the youth have the most at stake, right? You guys are going to live a long time compared to most of us. And, but you're struggling with the same issues we are too, in terms of engaging others that we care about. And I'm reading a book now that is also reinforcing for me the danger of a guilt complex, that guilt is just so riddled with shame. And once people go to shame, they get defensive and strange, you know. So I like what you're saying, some of those ideas, which is, you know, how do we connect with people? Because we do, as human beings, really, there really is an intersection there about what we care most about and what Darcy just said, what we love. And there is an intersection there versus, you know, and I've recently come to realize this, hammering people with facts can be like a club. There's a time and a place for facts and scientific facts, but first it has to really be, are we listening to each other? And are we caring about something in common? So I'm inspired to hear you talk about that too. And I think we have to kind of join forces here, right? Across all generations and develop a new practice, which is really about loving human beings and wanting to conserve a quality of living that could go by the wayside if we take it for granted. So thanks for making me also reflect on that.
Mhm. So Magnolias, any other questions or comments before I throw my last question to Lori and Luna? All right, Lori and Luna, we always ask the question, what advice would you give to other women? And in this case, what advice would you give to other teen girls?
I'll start. My first piece of advice would be something I still need to also kind of work on, which is prioritizing yourself and your mental health, which is really what we're talking about with eco-anxiety. So, you know, the most effective action doesn't come from doing everything and, you know, working really fast and trying to get everything, but it's doing like maybe less, but with the right mindset. So that's my first advice, really take care of yourself and make sure you have the energy, make sure you have energy sources, that you don't just put all that energy out there. You need to be able to recharge, because we need the 100% of you. And then my second piece of advice is to stay curious and to keep wanting to learn about, not only about climate change, but also about, you know, like we said, mental health and how to empower yourself, and feminism, and all these types of issues and things that so many people already know, or are looking into. And just stay want to learn, because the more you're gonna want to learn and be interested in those things, you'll suddenly know so much more than you did before, and it just, yeah, I think helps you along on your journey.
Brilliant. You know, that really reinforces a piece of advice that we've gotten more than once, and that is be less certain, be more curious. Yeah, thank you. Luna.
So it's kind of funny. I had the same exact 2 points. Take time to rest, because I think, you know, under our capitalist society, it's easy to frame productivity only as work in progress, but productivity is also rest, and reconnecting with our personal why. You know, why are we doing this work? So yes, absolutely agree. And then also curiosity. A question I often ask myself, and which has driven me, you know, to be here where I am today, is what if? Like, what if I could do this? What if we could change this? And I think when, you know, you're in those moments where you start imagining all the future things that you could do, and what if we could connect with this person and tackle this issue, it's very exciting, and we need that excitement in the movement. So yeah, agree with you 100%, Laura.
Well, thank you both. This has been one of the most inspiring conversations we've had. They've all been inspiring, but to hear you two and what you're doing, it certainly inspires me to do even more. And again, you know, the support, mentorship, anything we can do to help you in your journey, we are now connected. Any last words of wisdom, advice, good wishes?
For me, just thank you for giving us the platform. Lynn already said it, but it's so helpful for us to keep getting support and, you know, keep staying involved in this and having so many people who are just wanting to push us back up. So thank you for the platform.
Yeah, thank you all so much. It's been a wonderful experience, and just being with you all to work together on these intergenerational issues means a lot.
Wonderful, wonderful, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much.
What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she wears the crown? What happens when she rules her own